Don't flinch. Your sister is filming you. My husband messaged me at my dad's memorial service. I kept smiling and scanned the room, then replied to him with a single code word, Raven. 10 seconds later, his entire SEAL team, disguised as guests, stood up. What happened next made her regret it. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, not just in a small way, but so deeply that it struck at the very core of who you are? I spent 3 decades in uniform, a lieutenant general in the U.S. Army, facing down danger and injustice. But nothing prepared me for the quiet, calculated ambush that my own sister laid for me at my father's memorial service. The church was thick with the scent of old wood, lilies, and that heavy, silent grief that just presses down on you. The organ music rumbled deep in your chest. My father's photo, crisp in his Marine uniform, sat on the altar, his medals glinting in the candlelight. He was a Marine through and through, a man who drilled into me that honor isn't a gift, it's something you fight for. I was in the front pew, my husband Mark beside me. Mark, a 4-star admiral in the Navy, currently with Special Operations Command, was my rock. We'd agreed, today was sacred. No politics, no family drama. Just remembering Dad. Then I felt it. A subtle nudge under the pew. Mark's hand, hidden, slipped a phone into mine. My heart hammered, not from fear, but from a sudden, cold clarity. The screen lit up. Don't react. Your sister is recording you. Years of military training kicked in. Panic is a luxury. Reaction is the enemy's currency. My pulse didn't quicken. It actually slowed. My face stayed neutral, just a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on my lips as I looked back at the altar. But my thumb, hidden, typed one word, Raven. Not random. That was our code. 10 seconds later, I heard the soft scrape of chairs. 8 ordinary-looking mourners, scattered across the sanctuary, rose. No one knew they were Mark's SEAL team. Disguised, they moved with an unnerving, practiced grace. Splitting into pairs, they began scanning faces, quietly, precisely, confiscating devices. No raised voices. No arguments. The organ music swelled, a surreal soundtrack to the silent operation. Out of my peripheral vision, I saw Rachel, my older sister, freeze. The phone she'd been aiming at me slowly lowered. Her mouth opened, then closed. Her eyes darted between Mark and me, searching for an explanation, for a way out. And in that moment, sitting there in that sacred space, I knew. This wasn't just about today. This was about something much, much deeper. Something ugly that had been simmering, building for years. Why try to sabotage me now? At Dad's memorial? The questions burned, cold and precise, and I promised myself right there, I would find the answers. Rachel tried to play it off, a flimsy smile plastered on her face as a SEAL, dressed sharply, took her phone with a polite nod. She adjusted her scarf, whispered something to the woman beside her. Trying to look innocent. I'd seen that act before. My 20s, fresh out of commissioning, she'd tell people I joined the Army because I couldn't hack civilian life. At family dinners, she'd toast to Terry, Dad's favorite. A half smile that sounded like a compliment, but felt like a knife twist. Dad always told me, not every traitor stands on the other side of the battlefield. I thought he meant foreign enemies, political foes. I never imagined he meant someone you shared blood with. Someone who'd turn on you without crossing an ocean. Now, watching Rachel, I could feel her intentions, raw and ugly, even without hearing a word. This wasn't just sibling rivalry. This was calculated. Deep. Something she thought she could bury under the guise of grief. Mark didn't even glance my way. His eyes were fixed forward, hands folded. That's how I knew this was bigger than some petty stunt. For him to quietly activate a SEAL team? He already had intel. Pieces of a puzzle I hadn't even begun to see. As the pastor's voice filled the chapel, I kept my breathing even, my posture unbreakable. In the Army, you learn that the real battle starts not where the bullets fly, but in those moments when you have to stay absolutely still, even when every fiber of your being screams to move. 3 days before the memorial, I was in Dad's study, a room steeped in the scent of cedar and old paper. I was packing his things when I found a crumpled paper bag in a desk drawer. Inside, his purple heart. the one he'd earned in Vietnam. I held it in my palm. I was 10 when he first showed it to me, telling me, "This isn't for the wound. It's for the choice to keep going." That memory hit me like a physical blow. Later that night, Mark walked into the kitchen, his face grim. He'd received intel from someone in Rachel's inner circle. She had hired people. Their mission? To film me reacting at the memorial. If I cried too much, if I showed anger, if I dared to confront her, those clips would be twisted, edited into a portrait of instability. She planned to use it to challenge my inheritance and, even worse, to torpedo my pending nomination to the National Security Council. This wasn't just about money. It was about dismantling everything I'd built. That's when we came up with Raven. That's when we decided if Rachel wanted a performance, she'd get one. Just not the show she had written. After the memorial, Mark and I didn't say a word until we were back home, doors locked. We both knew the drill. Timing is everything. Sometimes, the silence right after a shockwave protects the truth. In the living room, he handed me a folder. Inside, still images, phone numbers, notes in his precise handwriting. These weren't random. Each linked to someone at the service, each marked with a symbol indicating their threat level. Mark, through SOCOM, had tapped into intel channels, a favor you don't ask lightly. His team had quietly traced Rachel's phone records and financials. The picture was already forming. Most names meant little, but one stopped my breath: Colonel David Mercer. I hadn't seen Mercer in 5 years, not since I pulled him from a joint projects unit at Fort Bragg. Brilliant on paper, reckless in practice. He'd ignored protocols, nearly getting people killed. I'd removed him, ensuring the record showed why. It was an unpopular decision, but necessary. Now, his name was linked to Rachel, not as an acquaintance, but a business partner in a consultancy she'd started. I put the folder down, took a slow, steadying breath. In the Army, you learn to see the battlefield not just as it is, but as it will be. I saw this one forming. Rachel hadn't just hired strangers. She'd aligned herself with someone who had a personal score to settle. Someone who understood the long game, using perception as a weapon. Mark watched me. "I know you want to confront her," he said, his voice low, "but that's exactly what they expect." He was right. Every instinct screamed for decisive action. But this wasn't a clear-cut mission. This was personal warfare, far more dangerous. Every move, every reaction would be scrutinized, twisted into their narrative. I told him, I needed more than names. I needed patterns. People always leave trails when they think they're clever. Over the next week, Mark's contacts fed us pieces. Mercer and Rachel, corner booth, restaurant near the courthouse. A payment fro. Rachel's account to a shell company, then to a private investigator specializing in emotional surveillance. I organized everything in a binder on my desk. Each page, a map of their miscalculations. I refused to let anger take the lead. Anger makes noise, and noise makes mistakes. Dad always said you don't win battles by shouting across the field. You win by making sure the other side never sees you coming. At night, I'd trace the lines in that binder. Names, places, dates. Each connection a tightening knot. And each time I saw Mercer's name, I reminded myself, revenge wasn't the goal. The goal was to ensure they could never touch my career, my family, or my father's honor again. The pieces were falling into place. All I needed was patience. And the absolute certainty that, in the end, the truth wouldn't just come out. It would stand so plainly in the open that even Rachel would have to face it. 2 days after the memorial, I drove to Rachel's house, casserole in hand. It was the kind of gesture Dad would have insisted on. My shoulders were squared, my resolve set. No arguments. Just a brief, watchful visit. Rachel wasn't there. Her daughter, Lily, 9 years old, all earnest smiles, opened the door. The babysitter, from the kitchen, said Rachel had stepped out. Lily tugged my sleeve. "Aunt Terry, come see what I made." She led me to the dining table, a row of paper crowns spread out. One was purple with silver stars. Purple always made me think of Dad. I placed it on her head. "Regal," I said. She giggled and spun. We colored quietly. Lily drew a medal, an oval with a ribbon. She shaded it purple. "Is this Grandpa's heart medal?" she asked. "The one for being brave and hurt at the same time?" My breath caught. "Yes, sweetheart," I said. "It's called a Purple Heart." She nodded, then tilted her head, the way kids do when they repeat something too heavy for them. "Mom says you're gonna sell all of Grandpa's medals." She said it so innocently, like asking about ice cream. Heat flooded my chest. Not rage, no, something heavier. A cold, sick feeling. I put the marker down. The room sharpened around me, the hum of the fridge, the distant clink of a spoon, Lily's tiny breath, waiting for my answer. Weaponized innocence. It doesn't arrive with sirens, it comes with wide eyes and open questions. I crouched to her level. "Sweetheart," I said, keeping my voice utterly even. "Medals aren't things I sell. They're things I protect. Your grandpa gave his country more than most people will ever understand. Those medals belong to the story of who he was." She frowned. "Then why would Mom say that?" "Sometimes," I said, "grown-ups speak from hurt. Sometimes, they are mistaken." I didn't add that sometimes, grown-ups use children to deliver cuts that leave bigger scars. Lily traced the paper medal. "Can you show me the real one sometime?" "Yes," I said. "I can show you. And I can tell you how he earned it." The babysitter called out. Rachel had texted, 10 minutes away. I helped Lily glue a ribbon to her paper medal. It felt like a silent promise. I left without slamming doors or calling Mark. The empty casserole dish sat beside me in the car. The insult was specific, razor-sharp. It didn't just bruise my pride, it struck at my father's honor. I could taste metal at the back of my tongue. On the drive home, I called an archivist at the Army Heritage and Education Center. By nightfall, I'd arranged temporary custody. The medals would be cataloged, photographed, stored in a climate-controlled vault. If Rachel wanted to spin a story about me selling them, the official record would scream otherwise. Facts are calmer than rumors. They endure. Back at my desk, I opened the binder, drew a stark red line between Rachel's name and Mercer's. Added a note. Leverage through child. Narrative contamination. I breathed in for 4, out for 6. I would not let them draft Lily into their war. I would not let them turn a child into a weapon against her own history. Ever. The family meeting, ostensibly about memorial donations, felt like a scene from a play. The living room smelled of coffee and lemon polish, a comforting scent that now felt sinister. Rachel sat across from me, legs crossed, a porcelain cup perched delicately. She waited for a hush, for every eye to drift her way, then smiled. Not a joyful smile. A predator's smile. "You know," she said, her voice light, almost brittle, "Terry's always been great at ordering soldiers around, but outside the army, I'm not sure she'd know what to do with herself." It sounded like a joke. It landed like a hand grenade. A few cousins chuckled nervously. My aunt stared at her lap. The words were meant to sink in, to poison the well. I set my coffee cup down, no sound. My posture held. My eyes found Mark's across the room. His jaw tightened, just a fraction. In that silent exchange, we knew. This wasn't a throwaway remark. This was the first shot. I could have retaliated. Years of command taught me how to dissect subtext, how to dismantle an opponent with words. But battles fought in anger rarely lead to victory. So I let the silence do its work. People remember who stayed calm. They remember who threw the first stone. Rachel turned, pretending her comment was forgotten, but I caught her quick, assessing glance. She was looking for damage. I gave her none. The meeting droned on, numbers, bank accounts. I wasn't listening. In my head, I was adding a new line to my mental binder, public undermining attempt. Witness count, 12. Mark's gaze held mine until we left. We drove home in silence. We didn't need words. The war had started. It just hadn't been officially declared. The day after that family meeting, Mark slid an unmarked envelope across the kitchen counter. He didn't say a word until I'd broken the seal and pulled out a small flash drive. "This came in last night," he finally said. One of the seals embedded at the memorial picked it up. He'd had it decrypted before breakfast. I went in my study, closed the door, and plugged the drive into my laptop. The file list was short, one audio file, time-stamped 2 hours before the service. My fingers hovered over the trackpad, a cold dread coiling in my stomach. Then I clicked play. At first, it was muffled. A clink of silverware, low background chatter, the ambient noise of a hotel lounge. Then a voice. A voice I knew better than my own. Rachel's. "Just get the moment," she was saying, her tone flat, chillingly businesslike. "I don't care if she's crying or snapping. Just get the moment she loses control." A pause. The faint sound of money sliding across a table. An unfamiliar male voice replied, "Understood. One clean shot is all it takes." Rachel's voice, sharper now, exactly. "People don't remember the whole story. They remember the image you give them. I want them to see her as unstable. The rest will take care of itself." I stopped the playback. Leaned back in my chair, the air suddenly thick, the walls closing in. I replayed it, eyes closed this time. I wanted every inflection, every chilling pause, burned into my memory. The seal had been sitting diagonally behind them, phone camera lens disguised as a shirt button, a directional mic sewn into his cuff. Pristine quality. Damning conversation. Mark had been right. This wasn't impulsive malice. Rachel had meticulously planned this attack, hiring someone with serious surveillance skills. It wasn't just about Dad's memorial or the estate. It was about crafting a narrative, a weapon she could wield across every circle we shared: family, professional, public. I added a new tab to my binder, direct transactions. Printed the transcript, noting timestamps, location, voice IDs. Every detail would matter. Not just for court, but for the court of public opinion. Part of me, a small, stubborn part, still wanted to believe this was a misunderstanding, that grief had warped her judgment. But no, this was calculated, deliberate. She had chosen her weapon. And that weapon was me. I sent a secure copy to our attorney, subject line, Category A evidence. Immediate review. Then I encrypted the original, stored it in a separate cloud only I could access, and locked the drive in my safe. When I stepped back into the kitchen, Mark was leaning against the counter, arms folded. "She's not just playing dirty," I said, the words heavy. "She's trying to rewrite who I am." He nodded once. "Then we'll make sure her version never makes it past her lips." That night, I listened to it again alone. Not because I needed to, but as a chilling reminder. In my line of work, intelligence isn't just about catching the enemy. It's about understanding their intent. Rachel had given me that for free. And I intended to use it until her own words became her undoing. After locking that audio file away, I sat at my desk, staring at the binder, but seeing nothing. My mind drifted, not to the evidence, but to the start. Betrayal doesn't just sprout overnight. Its roots run deep, sometimes decades. I was 21, the summer I told Dad I was joining the army. We were in the backyard, under the maple he'd planted when Rachel was born. He was cleaning his old service rifle, hands steady despite the arthritis. Rachel walked out with 2 iced teas, set them down, and sat across from him. "Tell her she's making a mistake," she said, not even looking at me. Dad didn't answer right away. He kept his eyes on the rifle barrel, cleaning it with that familiar, practiced precision. Finally, he looked at her. "Your sister has made up her mind." Rachel folded her arms. "She doesn't know what she's getting into. It's not like school or a summer job. This changes everything. It's dangerous. She trailed off, the words she wanted too sharp to utter. I started to speak, but Dad raised a hand, palm towards me, a silent command to let him handle it. "Rachel," he said, his voice calm, firm. "You're strong. Always have been. But your sister, she has an iron will. And sometimes that's what's needed most." The compliment felt like a badge of honor to me. But I saw the shift in Rachel's expression. Not just disagreement. Something colder. A flicker in her eyes I couldn't name then. She pushed her chair back, a harsh scrape. "Fine," she said, standing. "But don't come to me when it all goes wrong." She walked inside, letting the screen door slam. Dad sighed, went back to his rifle. "You can't expect everyone to understand your path," he said, quietly. "But you have to be ready for the weight that comes with it." At the time, I thought he meant the weight of command, of deployments. Years later, I realized he was warning me about a different kind of weight, the strain success can put on relationships, especially when someone feels left behind. That day, under the maple tree, Dad gave me his blessing. And in doing so, unknowingly, he planted a seed in Rachel. Not malice, not yet. Just comparison. And comparison, unchecked, blossoms into resentment. Sitting at my desk, decades later, I saw the through line, clear as day. Every jab, every rumor, every carefully placed word designed to undermine me. It all traced back to moments like that. Dad's honest praise had created a rift that never truly healed. The irony was bitter. He told me I had an iron will. He just didn't say I'd need every ounce of it, not for a battlefield abroad, but for the one waiting for me at home. 2 evenings after hearing Rachel's chilling plan, I got an unexpected call. Unknown number, but the voice was instantly familiar. Terry, it's Dana Whitfield. High school. I've stayed in touch with Rachel. Her tone was hesitant, each word carefully chosen. She wanted to meet. We chose a quiet coffee shop, public enough to feel safe. Dana was already there, stirring an untouched cup. She looked up, a tentative smile. I don't know if I should be here, she started, but I think you need to understand something about your sister. I said nothing, letting her find her own painful rhythm. She always admired you, Dana continued. When you got into West Point, she bragged to everyone. But things changed. Especially after your father's will came out. She felt invisible. Like you were the only one he truly saw. The words hung in the air. It wasn't news that the estate was uneven. My share was larger, tied to preserving Dad's military property and memorabilia. His decision, explained to both of us before he passed. I'd assumed Rachel had, at least, accepted it. I was so wrong. Dana leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. It's not just the money. She told me once, when he gave you that purple heart to safeguard, she realized he was trusting you with parts of him he'd never given her. She couldn't get past it. In my mind, I saw the binder's pages. Each piece of evidence, every calculated move Rachel had made. They were strategic acts, yes. But beneath them, a deeper, more personal wound. A wound she'd carried long before the memorial, long before Mercer, long before she even thought of hiring someone to catch me off guard. Dana glanced anxiously at the door. I'm not defending her, she said quickly. But I think you should know. It's not just about tearing you down. It's about her trying to fill a space she's convinced she'll never have. I thanked her, paid for her untouched coffee. On the drive home, the city lights blurred. This wasn't just about money or career sabotage. This was about a fracture running through us since childhood. A split Dad never intended, but never fully saw. It didn't excuse Rachel's actions, not for a second. But it reframed the battlefield. I wasn't just fighting an enemy. I was navigating the fallout of a lifetime of comparison. And that made the path forward both clearer and infinitely more complicated. The moment Mark's team rose in the chapel, the whole atmosphere shifted. No shouts, no barked orders. Just a sudden, subtle change in presence. Those ordinary faces, once blending into the grieving crowd, now moved with a quiet purpose that no civilian could quite place. Rachel froze, phone mid-swipe, her eyes starting to these new figures. Their movements were precise, almost reverent, as they fanned out, each taking a section. No camera flashes. No gasps. Just the soft scuff of polished shoes on wood, the faint creak of pews. My gaze stayed fixed on Dad's framed photo at the altar, jaw set, eyes forward, as if even in death, he was still watching over us. My phone, warm in my lap, was still humming from that single word, Raven. I didn't need to look at Mark. I could feel him a few rows back, the calm eye of a storm he'd choreographed weeks ago. 2 weeks before the memorial, over coffee in our kitchen, he'd laid it all out. She'll try something, he'd said. And if she does, we make sure she's the one exposed, not you. I bristled. Mark, this is my father's memorial. It's about him. It will be, he'd interrupted, his tone firm. But Rachel won't care about the sanctity of the moment. She'll see an opportunity. We take that away from her. He showed me diagrams, seating charts, shaded zones for visibility, notes on who sat where. The SEAL team, dressed in civilian clothes, would blend in as friends, distant relatives, even clergy. Their mission wasn't to intimidate. It was to quietly neutralize any attempt to record, manipulate, or distort the day. I looked at the plan. And if she does nothing? Mark met my eyes. Then they sit and they mourn your father alongside everyone else. No one ever knows. That was Mark. His operations weren't just about force. They were about precision, about anticipating every outcome without drawing unnecessary blood. In his world, the most effective takedowns often happened without a single shot. Back in the chapel, I watched a SEAL gently approach the guest next to Rachel, an older man I didn't recognize. The man, confused, simply handed over a small recording device. Another moved down the aisle, a phone quietly exchanged. All done with that cold courtesy Mark had emphasized. No accusations, no scenes. Just a silent, methodical disarmament. Rachel's phone was last. She resisted, a tight smile pasted on as she tried to hold on to it. But the blonde-haired SEAL in the black blazer was unyielding in her calm. She whispered something I couldn't hear, and Rachel's hands slowly opened. From my seat, I caught Rachel's eyes. Wide. Searching. Her mouth slightly open. For a split second, I thought I saw a flicker of recognition. Maybe a memory of another time she'd been outmaneuvered. Or perhaps that maple tree conversation with Dad, years ago. I didn't give her more than a glance. My attention returned to the altar, to the folded flag. The mission was underway. My role was simple. Sit still. Say nothing. Let the silence work its magic. The chapel hadn't fully settled when the murmurs started. First whispers, confused rustles as strangers collected devices. Then, the whispers sharpened into actual voices. An older cousin, face flushed with indignation, stood in the back. "Terry, what on earth was that?" His voice cracked like a splintering board. "This is your father's memorial, not some military stunt." Others joined in, softer, but laced with accusation. Disrespectful. Completely unnecessary. "She's turning this into a spectacle." I stayed seated, back straight, eyes fixed on Dad's photo. I let their words wash over me, like rain on a window, present, but not penetrating. Finally, I turned, meeting my cousin's glare with the calm precision I'd been trained for. "It wasn't me who made a scene," I said, my voice even, every syllable crystal clear. "It was the truth." And the truth stood up on its own. The sentence hung in the air, heavy. My aunt, Rachel's godmother, shifted in the third row. "Terry, you could have handled this another time," she said gently, her eyes full of judgment. "Your father would have wanted peace today." Peace. The word pressed against me, cold as ice. My father lived his life in service to a country where peace was often a delicate illusion, hard-won, defended, protected by quiet people who rarely got credit. He taught me peace wasn't the absence of conflict. It was the result of handling conflict before it could fester. I took a slow breath. "My father wanted the truth honored," I replied. "And if that meant revealing what was being done here in his name, then today is exactly the right day." The room split. Some nodded, understanding hardening their faces. Others shook their heads, thin-lipped, unwilling to accept that the sanctity of the service had been compromised long before Mark's team moved. Rachel sat frozen, hands clasped tight in her lap, eyes locked on me. She didn't speak, not yet. But I could feel the scorching heat of her fury. I could almost hear the silent accusations forming in her mind. Out of my periphery, I saw Mark. Still, stone-faced in his seat, his gaze flicking between me and the growing pockets of dissent. He knew, as I did, that when truth is revealed, people react in one of two ways. They cling to their old beliefs, or they step into the uncomfortable reality. Neither is wrong, but both have consequences. I turned forward again, my focus returning to the folded flag on the altar. Dad had carried that flag into 2 combat zones, brought it home untouched. Today, it felt heavier than any weapon I'd ever held. The murmurs didn't stop. They deepened, creating 2 distinct currents, quiet support and simmering disapproval. Sitting there, hands folded, posture unshakable, I knew. This wasn't just a single skirmish in a family feud. This was the opening salvo of a war years in the making. And today, the front line was finally, brutally, in full view. Rachel rose slowly, smoothing the fabric of her black dress as if nothing else mattered. The room hushed, watching, expecting an apology, or at least a final dramatic flourish. She gave them nothing. She walked down the aisle, heels clicking with measured, deliberate steps, every movement a performance she knew they'd remember. As she passed me, her eyes locked on mine. Not downcast. Not ashamed. Challenge. Pure, cold challenge. The kind you can't talk your way out of. The kind you have to answer. I held her gaze, my face still, breathing steady, just like I was trained for interrogation rooms. Mark didn't move, but I felt a subtle shift in his posture, a mental timestamp of this moment in our war. Rachel reached the doors, opened them without a backward glance, and stepped into the cold afternoon light. No slam. No dramatic exit. Just the quiet click of the door settling back into its frame. But that sound carried more weight than any shouted threat. It was her declaration. I'm not finished. The service continued, but the air was irrevocably changed. Conversations afterward were clipped, polite, everyone walking on eggshells. I shook hands, accepted condolences, thanked people, all while Rachel's stare burned behind my eyes. The look of someone who'd lost a battle, but believed she could still win the war. When Mark and I finally stepped outside, the winter air bit at my skin. But it wasn't the cold that made me shiver. It was the absolute certainty, sharp as her gaze, that Rachel's next move would be calculated, deeply personal and coming soon. And I would be ready. It started with a name. The former Army officer I'd flagged from Mark's intel, the one I'd removed years ago for falsifying readiness logs. He was now on Rachel's contact list. Suspicious, but what truly caught my attention was his new associates. Mark's team traced encrypted messages from him to a law firm in Arlington. At first glance, they looked like any other mid-tier practice. Beige walls. Polite receptionists. But the deeper we dug, the more it reeked of something else entirely. These weren't just lawyers. They operated in archives, HR departments, digital record systems. Their specialty wasn't defense. It was dismantling people. They built careers out of planting seeds of doubt, shredding credibility, political rivals, corporate leaders, military officers. The pattern was always the same. Find something small, a true but insignificant detail, an offhand remark, a minor error. Then inflate it. Wrap it in manufactured context. Feed it to the right channels until the damage was irreversible. If they couldn't find anything, they'd create it. Altered documents. Anonymous complaints. Whispers to the press. And now, they were working with my sister. It clicked. The recording stunt at Dad's memorial wasn't random. It was an opening shot. The real objective was colossal. If they could capture me losing control publicly, they could frame it as instability, leak it, let the rumor mill chew away at my standing in the Army. This wouldn't just wound my career. It would strip my security clearance, demolish years of operational trust, make me radioactive to every future assignment. Rachel wasn't just trying to embarrass me. She was trying to erase me. That night, I sat at the dining table, the files spread before me, names, timelines, connections drawn in stark ink. Mark leaned against the counter, arms folded, watching me process. They've been doing this a long time, I finally said. And they're good at it, he replied, his voice grave. Which means we can't just react. We have to own the timing. Dad's words echoed. Not every enemy wears a uniform. Looking at this intricate web, I realized this wasn't just Rachel's fight anymore. She'd plugged herself into something that had dismantled far stronger people than me. But what she didn't understand was that I'd spent my career operating in the shadows, learning how networks fall apart when you pull the right thread. The problem was, this time, that thread was family. 3 days after tracing that law firm, the hit landed. I was reviewing a readiness report when my phone buzzed. 3 rapid notifications from different friends, all the same, a link to a viral video. My stomach tightened. I knew. I just knew. The clip was 15 seconds. It showed me in a dimly lit room, holding Dad's purple heart, my face unreadable. Then a hard cut, me, tossing it into a trash bin. The camera angle shifted just enough to catch the clink of metal against the can. The audio was muffled, but over it my voice, clear enough to make anyone believe it's just a piece of metal. I froze. I knew exactly what they'd done. The first half? From a year ago, cataloging Dad's memorabilia. I was holding the metal over a box, not a trash can. The second half? From an unrelated charity cleanup, throwing out a dented lamp. They'd stitched them together, cleaned the audio, dropped in words I'd never spoken. By the time I finished the clip, the view count was skyrocketing. 20,000, then 22,000. The hashtag screamed. Hashtag hurt his respect, hashtag stolen valor, hashtag Los Andes Grace. I called Mark. He'd already seen it. It's staged, I said, forcing my voice level. Of course it is, he replied. But that's not the point. The point is they've chosen the battlefield. And they had. The comments section was a war zone. Calls for my resignation. Others defending me, shouting smear. Old acquaintances weighed in, some supportive, some with thinly veiled judgment. My inbox choked with journalists, military blogs churning out think pieces about the decay of honor. The speed was unnatural. Mark's cyber team confirmed it. The clip was seeded by accounts linked to that Arlington law firm, amplified by bots to create a viral trend. I leaned back, jaw tight, pulse steady. This wasn't just an attack on me. It was an attack on my father's memory. They had weaponized his metal, the values it represented. For a moment, the urge to fire back, to issue a public statement, burned hot. I could dismantle the lie. But then I remembered these people weren't looking for truth. They were looking for spectacle. If I reacted now, they'd have exactly what they wanted. So I closed the video, took a deep breath, and started planning what came next. If they wanted a battlefield, I'd make sure it was one I chose. That night, I stopped reading comments. I opened the binder. If they wanted a theater, I would choose the stage and the lighting. I called our attorney, then Mark. We agreed, one goal. Reveal the entire chain of manipulation in one controlled setting with independent witnesses and documented proof. The perfect venue clicked, the County Veterans Hall. They were hosting a public ceremony, dedicating a new display for local service members. Dad's name was already engraved on the bronze plaque. They'd asked me to speak. I'd almost declined after the smear. Now it was where I had to stand. I built the presentation like an op order. Phase 1, authenticate. The Army Heritage and Education Center would deliver certified photographs, archival scans of Dad's service records. A museum registrar would attend with custody receipts. Her testimony would corroborate everything. Phase 2, expose. Mark's team prepped the original footage from the cataloging day and the charity cleanup. Frame-by-frame comparisons showing cut lines, mismatched metadata. An audio spectrogram revealing spliced phrases. Hotel lounge security time codes anchoring the payment. File hashes for integrity. Phase 3, protect. Our attorney filed preservation notices, sought an injunction to stop further distribution of the doctored clip. I rehearsed my speech in the kitchen. Not for drama, but for clarity. I wouldn't accuse first. I would honor my father, define the facts, then let the audience see the contrast on screen. Few words. The evidence would speak volumes. I printed handouts with QR codes linking to notarized files, so anyone could verify on their own time. Mark handled security discreetly. No uniforms, no intimidation. Just quiet eyes in the crowd, ready for disruption. The goal wasn't humiliation. It was daylight. A retired judge agreed to sit front row, a neutral observer. 2 local reporters, no cameras, just notebooks. The night before, Dana texted, "Rachel knows something is coming. She looks terrified and furious." I thanked her. Then I wrote a final note on a yellow card for my pocket. Dad's words, "Not every traitor stands on the other side of the battlefield." I slipped it behind the program. It steadied my hands. At dawn, I drove to the hall, the binder on the passenger seat. The Purple Heart was already secured in the museum case. I touched the glass. The metal caught the light, almost seemed to breathe. Whatever happened on that stage, my father's honor would not be a prop. It would be the standard I raised. I was ready to return fire. Not with anger. with precision. Publicly. The Veterans Hall event was for the weekend, but justice moved faster. On Thursday morning, I walked into the county courthouse with Miss Hayes, my attorney. We sat at the petitioner's table. Across the aisle, Rachel adjusted her silk scarf, refusing to meet my eyes. The judge entered. Our case was called. Hayes rose, beginning with the meticulous chain of custody. She placed a sealed evidence bag on the table, then projected a timeline onto the courtroom screen. Exhibit A, the hotel lounge audio. We listened. Rachel's voice, cold and clear, instructing a paid proxy to capture the moment she loses control. No narration. Just her. Damning words. Exhibit B, the devices confiscated at the memorial. Serial numbers matched consent forms. One phone held a drafted caption, proof she cracked. Another, a message thread timestamped to the hotel audio. Hayes didn't grandstand. She walked the judge through metadata, line by precise line. Times. Tags. Versions. The small, forgotten fingerprints. Exhibit C, the viral clip of me dropping the medal, then the original sources, the cataloging day, the charity cleanup. A forensic analyst took the stand, explaining compression artifacts, spectral anomalies. He showed how my supposed quote was stitched from unrelated words, lifted from old interviews. The room was silent, save for his steady voice and the projector's hum. Exhibit D, museum receipts, custody logs from the Army Heritage and Education Center. Irrefutable proof my father's medals were secured long before the smear. The registrar testified, the Purple Heart hadn't left the vault in months. Facts. They starve lies of oxygen. The air in the courtroom thinned. Finally, Exhibit E, the money. Hayes displayed transfers from Rachel's account to a shell corporation, then outbound payments to a private investigation firm that conveniently shared an office with the Arlington law practice. Mercer's consultancy received 3 payments, labeled strategy packages. Modest amounts, yes, but regular. Carefully phrased. Never innocent. The judge leaned forward, asking precise questions. Dates. Handlers. Who pressed record and when? Hayes answered without flourish. When the analyst and registrar finished, the judge turned to Rachel's counsel. Objections were raised, then melted away baseless. The record had already spoken. We paused, the clerk shuffling exhibits. Papers rustled. The fluorescent lights buzzed. That's when I felt a light tug at my sleeve. Rachel had leaned towards the rail, just enough for only me to hear. I only wanted Dad to look at me the way he looked at you, she whispered. Just once. I didn't answer. My throat tightened, not with anger, but with a grief that arrived too late to change anything. A lifetime of comparison, a machine that had ground us both down. I remembered the maple tree. Dad telling us strength comes in different forms. Rachel, with her quick wit. Me, with stubborn resolve. He never meant to divide us. But his faith in me became a wedge neither of us ever learned to lift. The judge called us back to order. Hayes closed with one sentence. The facts show a deliberate campaign to fabricate instability and defame a serving officer, exploiting grief for advantage. She sat. No pointed finger. No raised voice. In the hallway, reporters waited. I passed without comment. Rachel emerged a minute later, her attorney whispering in her ear. Our eyes met for a heartbeat. No victory in mine. None in hers. Only the crushing weight of a family that dragged its quarrels into public because it couldn't resolve them at the kitchen table. The hearing ended without an immediate ruling. The judge took the matter under advisement, issuing preservation and restraint orders. I sat on a wooden bench, my hand over my chest, right where the Purple Heart would rest if I were Dad. Honor isn't a medal. It's a posture. I kept it. 2 days later, the Veterans Hall buzzed with conversation, the clink of chairs. Flags lined the walls. A bronze plaque, Dad's name etched into it, waited under velvet. I walked to the podium. My notes were brief. The evidence would do the heavy lifting. Mark stood in the back, with 2 discreet security observers. The museum registrar sat front row, the retired judge beside her, pen poised. I stepped to the microphone and let the room quiet on its own. I spoke about service. I said a name is stitched to a uniform, but honor is stitched to a life. Then I invited the registrar to confirm custody of my father's medals. She described the vault, the logs, the handling protocols. When she finished, I nodded to the AV tech. The screen lit up with the hotel lounge still. My voice was minimal. This is a recording, captured before the memorial service. The audio played. Rachel's voice, sharp and clear. Get the moment. I want the second she loses control. A few people shifted. One man stood, walked out, hands clenched. I let the silence hang. No comment from me. The next slide showed 2 frames side by side. My hands over a storage box. A dented lamp dropping into a trash can. The analyst calmly narrated. He highlighted mismatched metadata, showed the compression seams around the metal, played the spectrogram that revealed spliced words. When the side-by-side clip ran, the lie became visible. Without adjectives. Without a single word from me. Whispers rustled like wind through trees. A pair of veterans rose, walked out, heads bowed. Others leaned forward, scanning the QR codes on their programs. Their faces changed as the notarized files loaded. I held my shoulders square. Dad taught me to let facts do the climbing. I spoke again, not to accuse, but to draw a line around what truly mattered. My father's purple heart, I said, was not a prop. It was wounded into existence. It will never be used as a cudgel. I thanked the registrar and the analyst. Then I turned to the plaque and lifted the velvet. The metal caught the gymnasium lights. My father's name glowed. A man in a Korea War cap called out, "General, why not sue them tonight?" I answered plainly, the court is already in motion. Tonight is not for a victory lap. It is for setting the record straight. A woman near the aisle argued that family matters should stay private. I agreed. Then said, privacy was violated the moment a camera was aimed to manufacture shame. Near the back, Dana stood, her eyes on mine. She didn't wave. She didn't need to. I closed with one sentence, honor is quiet until you force it to speak. Then it speaks like this. The room held still. Some faces stern, some softened. A few remained skeptical. That's the cost of daylight. It can't choose who squints. When it ended, I stepped down, placing my palm on the plaque. I felt steadier than I had in weeks. I heard shoes behind me. Not a rush, just measured steps. I didn't turn. Whether they left in protest or approached with apologies, it didn't change the fact. The evidence was public. Preserved. Anchored to my father's name. The justice wasn't loud. But it was exact. And it was enough. After the ceremony, I waited in the quiet hall, collecting programs. My phone buzzed. Dana. She texted. Maybe she understood. Just too late. I asked what she meant. Rachel was in her car, behind the building, silent. Dana asked me to meet her outside. The parking lot smelled of cold metal and pine. Dana stepped from her sedan, a small craft envelope in her hand. She gave me this, Dana said. Told me to bring it to you if you still wanted the truth more than a win. Inside, a flash drive and a folded note. The ink was blurred in places, as if touched by water. Her handwriting. I read it under the sodium lights. I hired them. Mercer convinced me shame could level a tilted field. I was wrong. I will tell the court I was wrong. Use this. Do not protect me. Behind the note, a construction paper crown, purple like lilies. Across the band, a child's scrawl, brave. I closed my eyes. Brave is not the same as blameless. Sometimes, it's the first step into a storm you made yourself. I thanked Dana, asked her to text me when she got home. I called Miss Hayes, drove straight to her office. She photographed the envelope, logged the chain of custody, sealed the drive. A technician cloned it while we waited. The files, emails, invoices, Mercer's coaching, subject lines like narrative package and pressure points. Bank records linking the shell company to the Arlington firm, payment schedules matching the smear timeline, a memo labeling the viral clip as Phase 2. I didn't cry. I felt something steadier. Relief. For Lily. And for the part of Rachel that still knew the difference between power and repair. I drafted a reply, I will tell the judge you cooperated. I will not tell Lily you were a villain. I will let the record show what you did today. I didn't send it. I slid it into the binder behind Dad's yellow card. Driving home, the boulevard maples cast long shadows. I thought of our backyard, Rachel's chair scraping back. Maybe tonight she'd moved it an inch. An inch isn't absolution. It's a start. Starts matter. They don't erase harm. They change direction. My phone buzzed at a red light. Dana, she is at home with Lily. They're making crowns. I typed back, tell her the museum will keep the medals safe. Tell her Lily can visit them. I erased the message. Set the phone face down. Some words belong in a courtroom. Some words belong in the quiet space between sisters not ready to speak, but perhaps willing to begin. Someday. The ruling came on a gray Monday, a morning with no grand celebration, no crushing dread, just the heavy, firm weight of consequence. I sat at the petitioner's table with Miss Hayes. Across the aisle, Rachel, with her counsel. Mercer was 2 rows back, a stone-faced representative from the Arlington firm beside him. The judge spoke without theatrics. He adopted our exhibits in full. Accepted the chain of custody. Credited the museum logs. Found our authentication unimpeached. He summarized the memorial intervention as proportionate and orderly, undertaken to prevent the manipulation of grief for unlawful ends. Then, the video. Our analyst returned, detailing the splice again. Spectral anomalies, compression artifacts, mismatched timestamps, file hashes. The judge delivered the verdict in one sentence. The clip was manufactured to convey a false impression of contempt. The order came swiftly. A permanent injunction against further publication of the doctored clip. A written retraction, signed by all involved. Monetary damages, but the amount was secondary to the language that framed them. The court recognized a concerted campaign to manufacture instability and weaponize grief. It recognized the memorial as a stage for humiliation. It recognized my father's medals as props in a story designed to harm an officer and a family. Then, the gavel fell on referrals. The judge sent the record to the state bar, the inspector general, and recommended the district attorney consider charges for unlawful surveillance and wire fraud. He sealed my personnel records, restored my standing, commended the museum. The courtroom exhaled. I didn't feel triumph. I felt repair. Tight stitches across a tear that never should have been made. In the hallway, reporters swarmed. I offered one statement. The facts have been tested. The record stands. I will return to my duties. No mention of Rachel. No need. Outside, the sky broke, a pale band of light edging the clouds. Mark joined me on the steps, handing me a certified copy of the order. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, what mattered most, your father would have approved of the method. Not the noise. The method. I folded the order, placed it in my binder next to Dad's yellow card. Miss Hayes walked out, a satisfied nod. Her work, clean and careful, left no room for rumor. Rachel exited with her attorney. She didn't approach. She placed a hand on the rail, looking out at the street. She left without turning her head. Dana texted that evening, Lily at kitchen table. Paper crowns. Rachel quiet. By week's end, the museum accepted the court's findings for their archive. The Veterans Hall added a small note to their display, artifacts preserved by family and community custodians. My father's name glowed above the line. I touched the engraved letters, felt the steady metal. I'd regained the estate. More importantly, I'd regained the simple truth of who I am, independent of hashtags and edited frames. That night, I walked the perimeter of our yard, needing the quiet movement to calm the restless energy inside me. The wind carried the scent of pine. The neighbor's porch light cast soft gold on the grass. I wasn't celebrating. I was breathing. Repair is quiet. It asks for patience. It holds. I held it. 2 days later, a thin, unremarkable envelope slid through the mail slot. Circulars tumbled with it. I took it to the kitchen, opened it with a spoon. Inside, a single photograph, Dad and me on a parade ground. My hand raised in salute. His small, proud smile. Taped to the back, a strip of printer paper in block letters. You won this round, but you are never truly alone. I stood absolutely still. Threats don't always snarl. Sometimes, they whisper through something you love. I slipped the photo into a clear sleeve and called Mark. He arrived with a field kit, gloves, evidence bags, labels, UV wand. We documented everything. Sealed it. Logged the time. Then I called the detective assigned to the surveillance case. She came with a patrol officer, took custody, asked the right questions. Recent watchers? Camera alerts? Unexplained deliveries? I answered evenly. Ordinary details matter when someone wants to paint dread over your days. After they left, the street looked harmless again. Kids on scooters, a dog at a fence, a delivery truck rattling past. Ordinary is a disguise. That night, we rotated codes, audited access logs, changed layered passwords for alarms and cameras. Mark walked the perimeter with a flashlight, checking the gate, the oak tree where a lens might miss a sliver of sidewalk. I brewed coffee and built a checklist. Notify the museum, brief Miss Hayes, alert the Army liaison who monitors threats against senior officers. I wasn't afraid. I was awake. Fear is a spike. Vigilance is a posture you can hold. In the morning, the detective called. No usable prints. Paper and ink common. She recommended a sweep for trackers, a temporary patrol. 2 technicians scanned. Nothing new. Relief and confirmation arrived together. The sender preferred suggestion over intrusion. I recognized the tactic. Influence operations often end with a subtle nudge, making the target police herself. I set that nudge aside, like a tool I refused to touch. That afternoon, I drove to the Veterans Hall, stood before the plaque. Traced Dad's name. Considered what the sender wanted. They wanted hesitation. They wanted me to retreat from the work of repair, to let suspicion do what slander couldn't. Instead, I sent the detective a brief update. Public appearances proceeding, routine unchanged, just common sense precautions. The power of a threat is the behavior it buys. I would not pay. On the drive home, a black sedan shadowed me for 3 lights, then turned off. I noted the partial plate, no match in my memory. I eased my breathing, let the mirrors return to ordinary, and kept driving. I placed the photograph on my desk, framed it with the 2 paper crowns Lily had left. The message said, "You are never truly alone." I translated it differently. You stand in the company you keep. My father keeps me company. So does the record we've built. So does the quiet discipline that refuses to be steered by shadows. I opened my notebook, drafted a short statement to file if the sender ever stepped into the light. Precise facts. Dates. Chain of custody. Nothing a rumor could chew. The envelope aimed at my pulse. It missed. My pulse belongs to the work ahead, to the repairs already made, and to the knowledge that vigilance can be steady without surrendering to fear. I keep Dad's purple heart on my desk, where the late afternoon sun catches it. The metal flares, a pale, breathing light. I don't touch it often. I don't need to. It's not a charm. It's a sentence I repeat until it settles deep in my bones. Honor is a choice you keep choosing. The court spoke. The museum preserved. The Veterans Hall hung his name in bronze. These are necessary structures. Strong. But the work of keeping faith belongs to the living. To the quiet of a kitchen at dawn. To the decision not to answer provocation with provocation. To the promises you keep when no one would blame you for breaking them. I think of Rachel, at the table with Lily, making paper crowns. I think of Dana, crossing a parking lot with an envelope that changed everything. I don't try to make saints out of harm. I don't pretend the damage was small. I measure it honestly. Then I choose not to build a second damage, born of bitterness. Dad once said, courage is not a roar. It is a steady step across a room where you're needed. I take that step by writing down what happened, dates, sources, the lines that hold a story true. I take it by standing before the plaque, letting silence speak. If the sender of that envelope believes I'll live a cowed, chastened thing, they misread me completely. I will live as a keeper of records. Of promises. Of the boundary between justice and revenge. Revenge is a sharp tool. It satisfies little and breaks in your hand. Justice is slower. It holds. I can wait for it. Because I know exactly what I'm waiting for. Tomorrow, I'll drive to the museum, sign custody for a scanned photo of Dad, profile, eyes forward. In the evening, I'll cook something simple. Set an extra plate on the counter. My way of keeping him near. Grief remains. And so does gratitude. And so does the work. The medal rests in its case. The light crosses it. My breath returns to an even count. This is how I keep the promise he placed in my 10-year-old hand, to guard what deserves guarding. To walk forward with a steady heart. The cemetery sits on a low hill, wind carrying the scent of pine and cut grass. I parked under the old elm, walked the path I'd known since I was a girl, when Dad would bring flowers for the men he served beside. The new granite is still pale, his name sharp, as if the stone is still learning to hold it. I took a small purple heart lapel pin from a felt pouch. The original is in the museum vault, this little pin, my stand-in. I placed it at the base of the headstone, laid my palm against the cool granite. My breath misted in the morning air. I lowered my head, spoke as if the wind itself were listening. My voice steady. The words simple. I whispered, I kept it. That sentence held so much. I kept the medal safe. I kept our name clean. I kept faith with the training that taught me not to fight in anger. I kept the promise you placed in my hand when I was 10. Courage is a choice you repeat. I stood like that for a long minute, until the wind softened, the sun broke through. A groundskeeper raked nearby, nodded without intruding. 2 older veterans paused at a nearby plot. One lifted 2 fingers in a quiet salute. I returned the gesture. Stayed put. Our family had always been filled with noise, like a storm. Today, I craved the opposite, quiet that arrives and stays, because someone invited it. I told Dad about the hearing. About the museum registrar, protecting the chain of custody like a priest guards a chalice. About the judge, letting facts speak. About the veterans who watched those side-by-side comparisons and saw where falsehood was stitched. I told him I felt relief, not triumph. Repair, not victory. And that repair felt more like me than any celebration ever could. I told him about Lily. Her paper crown with silver stars. How children repeat what they're given. How I promised never to let her be used as a tool. I told him Rachel sent an envelope that helped the court find the truth. I didn't hide the harm she caused. I didn't decorate it. I set it next to the repair, the way you set bandages next to scars. A small bouquet leaned against the headstone, gladioli rosemary. I tucked the felt pouch beneath the flowers, straightened the flag in its metal holder. The breeze lifted an edge, dropped it again. A small, faithful heartbeat. I breathed with it. 4 counts in, 6 counts out. The drill I use when a room needs my steadiness more than my voice. When I stepped back, I saw my boots in the dew. Dark ovals that would vanish in an hour. The imprint comforted me. It meant I had been present. Taken responsibility for being present. That grief and duty could share the same ground, without argument. I traced the letters of his name with my fingertip. Not to polish, just to feel the groove. On the way to the car, the groundskeeper called, "Ma'am, the pin will be safe here. We keep our eyes on things." I thanked him, told him where the Real medal lived, how the vault would outlast us all, and how the story mattered more than the medal itself. He smiled. "Stories are why people visit," he said. "Medal only gives their hands a place to rest." I understood. I looked back at the headstone before driving away. The hill, its simple geometry. Rows of names. Shared silence. A flag above them all. Dad taught me honor isn't noise. It's posture. The posture I chose today, steadiness. The words I carried away, I kept it. I didn't drive straight home from the cemetery. I took the long way, through the neighborhood where we grew up, past the maple that once shaded our backyard. Another family lives there now. I slowed the car, just letting the scene be. A version of us, a younger us, still stood there. Forgiveness is too vast a word to lift in one day. I'm not ready to forgive Rachel. That's not cruelty. It's accuracy. But I'm done carrying the burning heat that tried to scorch my sleep. I won't let anger dictate my calendar. Justice has moved. Orders are written. The museum holds the logs. I can finally let go of the reflex to explain myself in every room. At home, I brewed tea, sat at the kitchen table. I drew 2 columns, damage and repair. Under damage, the smear, the hotel payment, the staged clip, how Lily was used as a messenger for a lie. Under repair, the injunction, the retraction, the archive, the quiet truth that now stands on its own legs. The columns didn't balance. They rarely do. But the second column had weight. It will keep growing if I feed it. I placed the page at the back of the binder, moved the binder to a shelf. I'm not throwing away vigilance. I'm refusing to worship it. There's a fine line between readiness and obsession. Soldiers learn it early. I thought of Rachel in her kitchen with Lily, making crowns. I could picture her hands cutting ribbon, her face tired. I'm not responsible for her healing. I'm responsible for my boundary. I'll answer the court when it calls. I'll answer Lily when she asks about her grandfather. I will not answer rumors. After tea, I walked the yard, checked the gate. The air smelled like rain, though the sky was clear. That scent reminded me, the weather inside a person can be very different from the sky above. I offered a small, silent prayer for the part of Rachel that brought the envelope. For the part that still believed truth could be chosen. I didn't grant absolution. I granted room. Room is where growth happens. I called my therapist, extended our standing appointment. Leadership doesn't cancel care once the crisis passes. Leadership widens the path. We talked about letting justice simply be. Not vengeance in a suit, but a structure that allows ordinary life to resume. Sometimes, the most radical sentence is, I am going to sleep. That night, I left the porch light on. Read a chapter from a book Dad loved. The words were steady. They built a shelter around me. I set the book aside, wrote a letter I may never send. I told Rachel I wouldn't oppose leniency if she cooperated. That accountability and mercy could share a bench if facts were honored. That Lily deserved parents who chose repair, publicly and privately. I sealed the letter, put it with the yellow card. Before bed, I stood at the window, watching the street. A neighbor carried groceries. A boy wheeled a bin to the curb. A dog chased a moth. Ordinary life doesn't ask for a speech. It asks for presence. I turned off the light. Let the house rest. Justice would keep its own watch. My task was to release the rope I'd been pulling. To trust that not everything needs my hands, all the time. I slept. Not perfectly, no. But honestly. The next evening, a dark sedan paused at our curb. Idled under the streetlight, its engine hum settling deep in my chest. Mark stepped onto the porch, met my eyes. I shook my head, stayed put. The car crept forward, reversed once, then slowly rolled away. As if the driver wanted the pause observed, not feared. I didn't follow. I gripped the rail, counted my breaths. Vigilance isn't panic. It's measured attention. Our cameras caught the plate, the time. We sent the clip to the detective, locked the door. Inside, the house felt like itself again. Light on the table, an open book, a mug drying by the sink. The message was simple, someone is watching. My answer was simpler, so am I. And I am not alone. What an incredible journey, right? It made me think so much about family, honor, and what it truly means to fight for what's right. I'm curious, what would you have done in my place? Or have you ever faced a moment where you had to choose between anger and a deeper, quieter justice? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I truly want to hear from you. And if this story resonated with you, consider subscribing for more personal narratives like this. Thanks for listening, and until next time, take care.